I'm going to get started. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Michelle Ottstott, and I'm assistant professor for the UAGC's Early Childhood Education Program. I'm the host of this session, which is called From Compliance to Collaboration, Fostering Collective Accessibility Practices on Cross-Functional Teams. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Your microphones will be muted for the presentation, but of course, we encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Also, we've enabled live captions, so if you'd like to use it, please click on Show Captions at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I'm so pleased to introduce to you Nicole Egelhofer-Wells from Faculty Support and Classroom Consults as a classroom consultant, and Diane Boggan, who is a faculty development and coaching specialist, both in academic affairs here at UAGC. And I'm going to give you a little bit of information about both of our speakers. Nicole has been with UAGC for 2 years, and during which she has partnered with stakeholders to design and deliver impactful professional development opportunities. Her recent work centers on anti-oppressive pedagogy and embedding accessibility practices into course facilitations and team-based workflows. Nicole is currently completing a PhD in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Welcome, Nicole. Diana has been with UAGC for 9.5 years, where she has supported faculty through faculty development, instructional support, and onboarding support. Additionally, her current work includes integrating AI into accessibility practices and creating tools that support neurodiverse professionals and inclusive teaching environments. Nicole and Diana, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mo. That was a great introduction. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, the science and soul of a learning organization. Today, our presentation focuses on how accessibility has evolved in our department, not just as a compliance goal, but as a collective learning process. We framed our work through Peter Senge's learning organization model because it helps us understand how learning, systems, and collaboration all connect to accessibility. You'll see how each part of our process, from design to evaluation, reflects the 5 disciplines described. Let's start by connecting those disciplines to the work we've been doing. We've structured our accessibility initiatives around Senge's framework because it naturally reflects how we operate as a learning organization. Systems thinking reminds us that accessibility isn't a single step. It connects course design, faculty development, and student learning. Each decision affects the larger system. Mental models reflect the mindset shift we've been making from seeing accessibility as a compliance task to seeing it as a marker of instructional quality and care. Our shared vision ties directly to the culture of care, a collective commitment to creating equitable, inclusive learning experiences. Personal mastery shows up in how faculty and staff continue developing their accessibility skills and experimenting with tools and improving their practice. And team learning, my favorite, is really what makes all of this possible. Collaboration across cross-functional work groups helps us learn from each other and strengthens the system together. With that foundation in mind, let's look at how these principles show up in our day-to-day work through digital accessibility and the tools that support it. So accessibility is about designing for everyone, making sure all learners can perceive, navigate, and interact with our content equitably. At its core, this means meeting web content accessibility guidelines, which define the technical standards for digital accessibility. Expectations for public institutions to ensure digital content is accessible to all users. The key idea here is proactive design. We don't want to fix accessibility issues after the fact. We build it in from the start so access is intentional and consistent across platforms. So next, we'll look at how we model that proactive approach in practice through our best practice examples. So in our department, we strive to integrate universal design for learning principles into every resource and training we create. We model accessibility through our own materials using clear structure, descriptive links, and strong contrast to just ensure a clear, consistent design. AI-assisted tools such as the auto caption correction agent that we'll talk about later make accessibility scalable. These practices demonstrate that accessibility is both achievable and sustainable when built into daily workflows. So why does this work matter? Accessibility is not simply a technical checklist or compliance task. It's a reflection of the culture of care in our institutional values. It directly supports equity, inclusion, and student success. Every accessible resource we create or help faculty create contributes to a more consistent and fair learning experience. This quote from our article in the UAGC Chronicle captures the essence of that message. Accessibility is not just a compliance requirement, it's an inclusive practice that reflects UAGC values, acknowledges the needs of our diverse student body, and supports our mission as an open access institution. Accessibility becomes part of how we define excellence and align around a common purpose across teams. So how does this connect to institutional context? Accessibility is a visible expression of our culture of care, how we communicate, advocate, respect, empower, and stay student-centered. Every accessibility improvement is an act of care that makes learning more equitable and inclusive. It also reflects our mission and purpose to make quality education accessible to all learners, regardless of background or circumstance. When we design with accessibility in mind, we're putting that mission into practice. Accessibility directly supports our students' success goals, helping students persist, complete, and find value in their education. Barriers to access are barriers to success. So every accessible resource contributes to retention and completion. Connecting back to the TLC theme, we're learning continuously as a community. We're shaping systems, challenging assumptions, and aligning around a shared vision of equitable education. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Nicole so she can talk about the broader national landscape, the recent Title II rule change, and what it means for higher education.
Thanks, Diana. In addition to our departmental and institutional commitment to of a 2024 update to Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, all public entities must ensure all their public-facing digital content meets Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA as the minimum standard for accessibility. To break this down a bit, public entities include all state and local governments and any office or organization controlled by a state or local government. This includes public libraries, school districts, transportation authorities, and public universities. If it's a government organization that provides services, programs, or information to the public, it's considered a public entity under Title II. Digital content includes anything a public entity provides online or through digital technology that communicates information or provides services to the public. This includes websites, mobile apps, online forms and applications, PDFs, documents, videos, multimedia content, learning management systems operated by public institutions, and web-based portals. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are internationally recognized technical standards developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, to make digital content accessible to people with disabilities. 2.1 is the current version adopted by the Department of Justice in the 2024 rule, and Level AA is the minimum compliance level, which addresses key accessibility barriers like text readability, video captions, color contrast, and keyboard navigation, for example. Slide, please. For public entities that service populations over 50,000, the compliance deadline is April 24, 2026. Public entities that serve smaller populations have until April 2027 to comply with the Title II rule change. There are limited exceptions to the rule, including archived digital content that is no longer used or updated, Some third-party content, like social media feeds or external data tools that are outside the control of a public entity, and personal password-protected documents that are not available to the general public. There are, however, exceptions to the exception, if you will, and that is if an individual requests access to this content, the public entity must provide an accessible alternative. Failure to comply with the Title II rule change carries real consequences, including legal action, potential loss of funding, and reputational damage from the perception of exclusion or inequity on the part of the public entity. But compliance with the rule change isn't just about avoiding penalties. Meeting accessibility standards improves usability of digital content for all people, including the elderly, mobile users, people with slower internet connections, and multilingual audiences. For example, a student with a slow internet connection may have difficulty loading and viewing a video in their online class. But if the instructor has provided a video transcript, that student can still access the information from the video in a textual format. Bringing our digital content into alignment with the Title II rule change will help us create more inclusive and impactful digital environments for all of our users. Slide, please. So I want to take a moment to frame the Title II rule change in terms of what our department does. The Faculty Affairs Department at UAGC plays a key role in supporting the university's academic mission. We provide professional development opportunities, faculty onboarding, mentorship, resource development, and more to help our faculty at every stage of their careers. Through these services, we generate a wide variety of digital content, training modules, SharePoint pages, forums, videos, journal publications, workshops, conferences, and so on. Because of what we produce, all of what we produce is shared digitally with faculty and staff. Digital accessibility is central to how we serve our community. That's why the 2024 ADA Title II rule change is so significant for us. It's an opportunity to ensure that every resource, training, and tool we create is usable and equitable for all of our faculty and staff. As a department, we've begun taking steps toward greater digital accessibility in several ways. Our first step is to know exactly what we have. The Title II rule change requires all public-facing digital content to meet accessibility standards, so we're starting by creating a full inventory of our digital assets. This inventory helps us identify what's compliant, what needs improvement, and where we have the largest accessibility gaps. This proactive approach is the foundation for an organized, realistic accessibility plan, rather than reactive, piecemeal approaches later on. As we gain a better idea of our full digital content inventory, we'll begin to prioritize our remediation efforts. We have a fairly small team working to review hundreds, if not thousands, of digital assets, in addition to our other projects and job responsibilities. Our strategy is to start with high impact and high traffic content first, those resources and SharePoint pages that faculty and staff use regularly. We'll work systematically, setting achievable goals and stages. In this way, our progress is sustainable and focused where it will help the most people. We're building awareness and capacity to implement accessibility practices through focused department-wide trainings and resource development. By framing accessibility as everyone's responsibility, we ensure that every team member understands what accessibility means, and how their work contributes to it. The desired result of these trainings is that accessibility becomes part of our department culture and daily workflow across work groups, not a siloed task. Ultimately, our overarching goal is not just meeting the compliance deadline, it is a collective shift in our mindsets towards proactive, inclusive design. That means accessibility is integrated into every new web page and resource we create from the beginning, instead of remediating this content at the end of development. When we prioritize accessibility throughout the production process, we reduce future workloads, minimize the risk of noncompliance, and create a better digital experience for our learning community. The compliance deadlines may sound far away, April 2026 for larger entities and April 2027 for smaller ones, but for a university, that's practically tomorrow. We want to avoid the trap of waiting until the last minute and then scrambling to meet requirements under pressure. Accessibility takes planning, collaboration, and testing. Starting early allows us to build capacity and not chaos. We also want to avoid a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to training department members. Different roles touch digital content in different ways, so we're tailoring our training so that it's relevant, practical, and aligned with each group's responsibilities. That way, people can actually apply what they learn immediately to their daily task. Finally, and most importantly, we want to avoid burnout or lone hero syndrome. That's when one or two people end up carrying the entire accessibility effort for everyone else. It's not sustainable and it leads to uneven progress. We also don't want our colleagues who are new to accessibility practices to feel overwhelmed by the new requirements. Instead, we're building an accessibility plan for our department that is based on shared ownership and shared learning. This frames accessibility as a collective ongoing responsibility. By distributing the work and learning across the department, we create space for collaboration, mentorship, and gradual growth in accessibility skills. Each team member contributes according to their role, whether that's designing content, managing digital assets, or creating resources and communications, so no one is working in isolation. In doing so, we strengthen our culture of inclusion and ensure that accessibility becomes a sustainable part of how we operate every day. In short, the successful integration of digital accessibility practices depends on collaboration across work groups, not just the efforts of a few individuals. Slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the cross-functional work groups and their responsibilities. In Faculty Affairs, our work is divided into several work groups or buckets, with each member serving in 3 to 4 buckets. For purposes of brevity, we'll focus on the work groups that develop or maintain the vast majority of the department's digital content. The Guides team is responsible for creating job aids, videos, and other resources to document work processes for training purposes. The development team designs and delivers impactful learning experiences, including workshops, faculty onboarding, training courses, and other professional development opportunities. The asset management team reviews and catalogs the department's digital assets and maintains the platforms in which these assets are housed, including our SharePoint pages, YouTube, and our faculty help repository. Finally, the communications team develops and manages our communication channels to faculty, including our weekly digest, emails, social media posts, SharePoint pages, and the UAGC Chronicle. As we work through ways to help faculty affairs staff integrate accessibility practices into their workflows, we've run up against a few challenges. We all have different levels of knowledge and experience with accessibility practices. Some of us are just beginning to learn what accessibility means in our day-to-day work, while others have already been applying these practices for a while. In some ways, that's a strength because it means we can learn from each other. But we also need to be intentional about how we train and support team members so that no one feels overwhelmed. In our various work groups, we produce a wide range of digital content using different tools. We have folks that are responsible for creating or updating our SharePoint pages, our faculty help repository, our Chronicle, data dashboards, training courses in RISE, job aids, forums, weekly digests, faculty newsletters, assessment reports, and so on. So the kinds of accessibility practices that are relevant to our roles can vary. That makes it tricky to develop accessibility training that is relevant across groups, but it also gives us an opportunity to think about how accessibility fits into our specific roles. It can be easy to think of accessibility as someone else's job, like the Guides team, for example, but accessibility is a shared responsibility. So how do we encourage our various work groups to take ownership of that responsibility and integrate accessibility practices into their workflows? How do we make accessibility a part of our departmental culture? Slide, please. As our department works towards creating a collective accessibility mindset, our work groups have started collaborating on several cross-functional initiatives to bring us into compliance with the Title II rule change. These include department-wide trainings, the development of accessibility resources for faculty and staff, leveraging AI through the creation of an accessibility agent in Microsoft Copilot, integrating accessibility practices into our TLC content, and drafting a department accessibility plan to guide our work. We will now discuss each of these initiatives in greater detail. Slide, please. Earlier this year, all of our faculty affairs work groups participated in an initial brainstorming session focused on accessibility. The goal of this brainstorming session were to assess the current level of knowledge of accessibility practices within the department and where these practices are already being implemented in our workflows. 2, to communicate the new standards for accessibility in our digital content. 3, emphasize the importance of accessibility in our digital content and frame it as a shared responsibility. And 4, identify barriers that could prevent us from integrating accessibility practices into our workflows and the types of training and supports we would need to overcome these barriers. Department members were divided into breakout rooms based on their overlapping work groups and asked to answer a series of questions regarding their current accessibility knowledge and practices. From this brainstorming session, we found that some groups were already actively implementing accessibility practices in their workflows by incorporating accessible language, clear formatting in their documents and templates, and presenting information in multiple formats to make it easier for users to engage with that content. Other individuals expressed their lack of knowledge or confidence around implementing accessibility practices in their work, particularly because there are so many rules it can be difficult to ascertain when and how they apply. Some individuals noted time constraints as a barrier to implementing accessibility practices. Sometimes they're so focused on meeting a deadline for a project or complying with accreditation standards that they're often rushing to perform accessibility checks at the end of a task. For those who are not as familiar with accessibility practices, there is also a learning curve that makes performing accessibility checks more time-consuming. Some workgroups reported that existing technology systems sometimes make it difficult to implement accessibility standards because of formatting constraints or outdated systems or inconsistent tools. Tech tools like the accessibility checkers in Canvas or Microsoft Word, AI agents, or the YouTube captioning tool are great resources for us to help manage the accessibility workload. But sometimes, for whatever reason, technology just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Several work groups noted that there is currently no unified institutional plan to bring us into compliance with the Title II rule change. This lack of clear guidance at the institutional level leads to more confusion on how the rule change will impact our work and what we should be doing to prepare for it. After identifying the potential barriers to implementing accessibility practices in their workflows, faculty affairs team members were asked to brainstorm what kinds of trainings, resources, and support systems would help them overcome these barriers. Our cross-functional teams are eager to engage in ongoing conversations about accessibility and to share resources or examples of good practice. There is interest in collaborative learning spaces where teams can provide feedback on each other's digital content. We're also interested in including accessibility tips in our weekly digest communication to help our broader learning community begin to take practical steps towards Title II compliance. Our work groups also expressed a desire for resources and micro trainings focused on specific aspects of accessibility, the reasoning behind these different rules, and how to apply these practices in daily workflows. Past departmental trainings have attempted to cram a lot of information into a single workshop, which can be overwhelming. Shorter, more focused trainings and resources tailored to faculty affairs workflows would help keep team members building capacity and putting these standards into daily practice. A key point that all of our work groups identified is the need to proactively build accessibility into our templates and workflows. We are reviewing our current workflows to determine how we can embed accessibility throughout our digital content creation processes. This means that accessibility is not a last-minute add-on, but a key component of how we create and share content. Accessibility checks are being incorporated into regular review points within existing workflows, reducing the need for later remediation. We are also developing and sharing accessible templates, style guides, and accessibility checklists to provide consistency across work groups. There are discussions about an institution-wide digital accessibility plan to comply with the Title II rule change. While we await more detailed guidance from the institution on how the Title II rule change will impact our work, we as a department can begin taking steps towards compliance by developing a departmental digital accessibility plan. This plan will help us frame our accessibility workload in manageable and sustainable ways. Another accessibility initiative that is being undertaken by our faculty affairs workgroups is the creation of accessibility resources for faculty and staff. These resources will help us be more proactive in integrating accessibility practices in our workflows. The Guides Workgroup has created several job aids that document accessibility processes, including adding alt text to images, making descriptive hyperlinks, adding captions to videos, and more. We have also created a series of short video walkthroughs to accompany these job aids. By providing the same information in both textual and video formats, we ensure that all users can engage with the content of these resources in their preferred manner. The Guides team is also in the process of developing accessibility checklists that are tailored to various faculty affairs workflows. These checklists will help us consistently apply accessibility practices across work groups and digital content. Our asset management team is adding and tagging all of these resources to our faculty help resource repository. This ensures that faculty and staff can easily access these resources in one place. Finally, it does no good to create these resources if people don't know they exist. So our communications work group is really stepping up to make sure that folks are aware of these accessibility resources via our various communication channels. I will now turn it back over to Diana to discuss our other accessibility initiatives.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm excited to talk more about some of the work we have been doing. We are creating a custom AI accessibility tool using Microsoft's Copilot. The idea behind this tool is to expand accessibility support from remediation, fixing issues after the fact, to guided learning where users can identify and address accessibility issues while creating content. It's designed for non-experts and integrates with common tools like Word, PowerPoint, and Canvas. It also uses built-in accessibility checkers as a foundation, but goes further by prompting users to consider elements that require human judgment, things like clarity, contrast, layout, and inclusive language. This model reinforces that accessibility should begin on the front end of design, not at the end of production. It helps build shared ownership of accessibility across teams. Right now, the prototype primarily reviews documents against WCAG and Section 508 standards, but the next phase will add design guidance and context-aware feedback. Next, I want to talk about the AI tool we are developing that fits into our larger learning process and goal of moving beyond remediation. The goal isn't to create another workflow, it's to build a learning loop that supports accessibility across the entire life cycle of content creation. The AI tool starts on the front end, guiding users as they design documents or presentations. This early support helps non-experts build accessible materials before problems occur. Next is an AI-assisted review where the agent checks against the WCAG and Section 508 standards. It flags both technical and usability issues, giving teams a clear starting point for refinement. Then comes human validation, our cross-functional collaboration that ensures accessibility isn't just technically correct, but meaningful, clear, and human-centered. Finally, continuous learning closes the loop. What the agent and reviewers uncover feeds directly back into our training, templates, and future AI refinements. That's what makes the system adaptive. Each stage informs the next. So to see how this model works in practice, let's look at how we used the same process during our Teaching and Learning Conference video captioning project. So I'm really excited to share how we applied this process to another custom AI tool we created for this TLC's video project. So this AI tool helps correct the auto-generated captions from YouTube, which are not super correct, for spelling and punctuation, and then creates a list of words and phrases that need manual review, because no auto-generated text is ever going to get that WASC is WSCUC and not WASP or WASK. It just doesn't quite clearly have that context. So our four-person team managed about 30, just under 30 pre-recorded sessions before this conference using an AI-assisted workflow. After the conference, we'll process another 60 or so live recordings using the same system. The custom GPT that we use session metadata, such as presenter names, keywords, and tags to make more accurate in spelling and punctuation corrections, and to generate a targeted list of words and phrases that needed verification during manual review. That gave us a more efficient way to identify potential errors instead of re-listening to the entire recording from start to finish. This workflow shows strong potential for improving captioning efficiency and consistency across large volumes of content, while full manual listening remains the standard for ensuring compliance. This process helps us get closer to that level of accuracy, which is 98%, in a more scalable way. These results are helping shape our department accessibility plan, a framework that formalizes and expands these accessibility practices across our department. The department accessibility plan is currently in development and represents the next step in how we approach accessibility as a department. It's designed to be iterative, a living framework that grows with our experiences instead of a static checklist. It captures what we've learned through projects like the TLC video captioning process and formalizes those insights into a structured, scalable plan. This plan will guide how we integrate accessibility into every phase of our work, from document creation and media production to review and archiving. So that accessibility becomes a shared, consistent practice across our department. It also connects our work to larger institutional expectations, such as Title II compliance, while staying grounded in our culture of care. We want every team member to feel confident and supported in contributing to accessible, equitable learning environments. All right, you have been listening to us for a while, so we would love to hear from you. So there's some questions on the screen. I just want you to take a moment to think about your own work and consider where accessibility may fit in your workflow. Is it at the front end, the back end, or both? What's an accessibility habit or resource you could strengthen this year? And if you're comfortable, share a quick thought in the chat, or you can even come off mic and share that way. Just even one idea can help others to think about what's possible. So I am going to open the chat so I can see it. I'll give you guys a moment to reflect. So let's start off with, if you think about where accessibility fits in right now, are you thinking about it when you are designing content or after content to check as a checklist to make sure that you hit all the boxes? Or do you do kind of a combination of both?
Yeah, it looked like Joanna may have had her hand up.
Oh,
Hi, I work in the prior learning assessment department. So I work with students who are trying to translate their lived worked experience into credit for stuff they already know, so they're not retaking courses that is duplicative of their life experience. And so a couple things like we do in our department is we kind of have a like unwritten policy that if we've emailed or commented on a student's work twice and they're still not understanding the feedback or that it's not coming back around, we pick up the phone. We try and call the student. We try to have a conversation because sometimes we may think we're articulating something very clearly. We may try and change it, and it's still not clear. And just having that conversation 99% of the time clears up the confusion, or the student, it opens the door for the student to have that conversation and ask the questions in real time or repeat back what we said to make sure they're understanding it. So it opens that door a little bit differently of not just because we're an online school doesn't mean everything has to be in writing. And so we open that door to the conversation in that way. And then we're also currently going through a PLA program review, and accessibility is part of our conversation is the formats that we have the best way to for somebody to present their learning to us. And we've been working with the Office of Access and Wellness to make sure we have that voice in our resources, that if a student has an accommodation, we may need to think differently about how we do our stuff. We haven't had somebody come to us, but we want it at the forefront of what we're doing, that if a student's not great at writing an essay or they have a writing accommodation, an essay may not be the right way. How can we adapt that format differently for them to be able to still achieve the credit?
those are some of the really great points, Joanna. I like that you're thinking about it from the front end and kind of the back end too, in both ways. And working with the Office of Access and Wellness is a great collaboration there. There are some awesome people there. And, one thing I think that we haven't mentioned is that, students sometimes don't want to self-identify. So there are students who have those learning disabilities and challenges, but they don't want to express that. So if we're making sure that things are already accessible, it really hits more students that need it.
And I love, Joanna, that you all are considering multiple methods of engagement as well, like how, different students may, respond better to video resources or textual resources or audio resources and providing that information for them. And to Diana's point, that, some students are not self-disclosing all the time. Some faculty and some staff who have, various learning abilities are not self-disclosing either. They're just kind of finding ways to adapt or maybe even struggling through it in ways that we don't always recognize. So by providing those resources proactively to people, that, saves them time, it helps them to be able to stay on task and not have to worry about, trying to compensate and trying to catch up all of the time.
Pete, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I do apologize. I dumped water on my laptop 2 days ago. My video and other things aren't working. But anyway,
okay.
My question, as it applies to accessibility, is it's in regards to when we were building curriculum. Okay, because I know with the 508 and the WCAG 2AA. Okay, so they want us to be accessible, right? They want. And we have to comply, on a federal level. But the issue is that it's hard to build courses that have hands-on virtual labs for everyone, for every disability out there, right? Because you just can't do that. And so I think that as a university, we have to come together and figure out how, because no vendor, as it applies to virtual hands-on labs, has 100% accessible at all, period. Any vendor we deal with. And so we find that we're hitting a lot of roadblocks when we're building curriculum because, during the curriculum, they're all like, oh, that book's not accessible or that's not accessible, right? It would really be nice if we could find a fully accessible vendor that we can just go to and then build these hands-on virtual labs. And in the world of cybersecurity, it's important that students do these hands-on virtual labs because that's what's given them the experience to graduate from our school and join the workforce in cybersecurity. So it's so I get that everything has to be accessible, but at the same time, we also want the students who do not have accessibility, documentations to be able to do those virtual labs because they need those hands-on. And we can, and if we do, I've never had a student in my program ever have any accessibility issues or anything like that, but we don't know if we're ever going to have one. But I think we have to come together with the UAGC legal department as well as University of Arizona, since we are now merging, and figure out how we can come to this happy medium of how can we stay in compliance, but at the same time be able to build curriculum, right, and not have roadblocks saying that, hey, that's not accessible or that's not accessible. So I don't know, what do you guys think about that? Because it is happening.
No, I think you bring up a very valid concern, and knowing the program that you're in, because my son just enrolled in your program. As in a UAGC specifically faculty, you have access to a course, an accessibility resource center that was created by the UAGC that helps course developers in particular. And knowing that we want those hands-on experiences in these virtual environments, we don't want to shy away from that. So it's making an equitable experience. So working with your course designers, your instructional design specialists on how to make sure that if the tool that you have cannot 100% meet accessibility, do you have some sort of alternative experience for somebody who needs it? And you can't maybe address every single disability that there may be that would be a barrier for that tool that you're doing, but you can look at how it's doing video, how it's doing keyboard navigation, and you can address those issues as best as you can, and working with your specialists to make sure that you have an equitable experience and an alternative experience if the tool cannot meet certain things. So I think that it's just being aware and knowing also that this happens in stages. You can't be expected to drop everything on its head in one day. It takes longer than that. So that is a great question.
Okay, and thank you for that. And just going back to the, I think we need to maybe think about, because as curriculum SMEs, we know what we need the students to learn, right? Those hands-on virtual labs, and then we have the accessibility and the department saying, hey, this is not accessible. All right, but you mentioned how we should try to look for an alternative assignment to make it accessible. But the issue arises is that we're content specialists. A lot of us don't know anything about accessibility and how to turn anything into accessibility. I think we would need a whole new team to be able to go, and we have one team saying, okay, this is not accessible. You have the SME, and then I think we need another team to say, hey, not a problem. We're going to help you turn that into something that's accessible, because we as SMEs can't turn something into something accessible when it's a virtual environment. Like I know I can't, because we usually use third-party vendors, and so the student will log on into the course in Canvas, and they'll click a link, and it'll automatically take them to the vendor, and then they'll start their virtual lab. But you're right, a lot of the times they can't do that tab. If someone has an accessibility issue, they won't be able to do the tab key function, and so that is one of the issues that we have with all our vendors. That every vendor that we have right now, as it applies to online virtual labs and those hands-on virtual labs, we have that same issue, and so it's definitely an issue, and we definitely need to look into it. But I really do think we need another team that actually is going to write the accessibility content for us.
And I think that's where there is a way for I'll send you a link to that site I told you about. There is a way for our faculty to get consultations with accessibility experts to help them with that.
Perfect.
But thank you for your
thank
comment.
you. Appreciate
it. Thanks for those who shared in the chat. I want to wrap us up. I want Nicole I'm going to hand off back to Nicole, and she's going to highlight some collective strategies for collaboration and how we can keep moving this work forward together.
Thanks, Diana. Based on our ongoing efforts to foster cross-functional collaboration on accessibility within our department, we wanted to offer a few strategies to help you all do the same within your departments or institutions. Again, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and there will be some nuances depending on the size of your work group and institution, the types of digital content you produce, and your training needs. But think of these strategies as a rough starting point for how you can approach this work. In order to implement accessibility practices across work groups, you must have a solid idea of the specific responsibilities of each group. What kinds of digital content do they regularly produce? What groups have shared tasks or overlapping workflows? And how comfortable are team members with implementing accessibility practices? Where are these practices already being implemented, and where are their gaps? The cornerstone of any collaborative effort is open and ongoing communication. Communicate the new standards for accessibility in public-facing digital content early and often. Emphasize the importance of accessibility to your departmental and institutional culture, and how the Title II rule change will impact your team's workflow. Encourage team members to be honest about any lack of knowledge around accessibility, barriers they foresee in implementing these practices in their workflows, and their training and support needs. Slide, please. Identify your existing resources. Research what other institutions are doing to prepare for the Title II rule change and what kinds of strategies and trainings they are implementing. How can these strategies inform your institution's approach? Conferences like TLC are a great place to connect and network with folks around the country who are trying to navigate these new accessibility standards. What work groups outside of your department are working on accessibility initiatives, and how can you collaborate with them? In Faculty Affairs, we have been fortunate to be able to connect with experts outside of our department for feedback and clarification on Title II requirements as we develop resources and our departmental accessibility plan. So a big shout out to Elena Pascarella and Leah Belsley for your support. Co-create a digital accessibility plan, and the key word here is co-create. This means bringing together all relevant teams to establish shared goals and responsibilities. When everyone has a voice in developing the plan, it builds ownership and accountability. Finally, accessibility isn't a one-time project. It's a continuous learning process. By committing to ongoing shared learning and development, we're acknowledging that accessibility standards, technology, and best practices will continue to evolve. This means creating a departmental culture where teams regularly develop and share resources, leverage technology, and learn from each other's experiences. So at that, I will turn it back over to Mo.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nicole and Diana. That was such great information. And as a course developer myself, I absolutely understand the importance of the collaboration that goes into ensuring the accessibility for our students within our courses. So thank you for sharing the why behind all of the work that we do. I also want to thank our audience for your participation in our session today and encourage you to click on the link in the chat to nominate for TLC presentations for conference awards and to give feedback on today's presentation. I want to thank everyone for such a great session, and especially Diana and Nicole.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the conference.